In most African countries, specifically in the West Africa, we have not seen the prosperity that has benefited the average African.
The best friend that betrayed Thomas Sankara. That's how we knew him.
Do you have any guesses for why the French wanted that piece of land?
The problem with people like him is they're not leaving behind like viable institutions for success.
Nope.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Jola Mr. Madi podcast. I am your co-host, DJ Anzo. I'm here with my man, Young Money E, Young Money Millionaire.
Come on.
Uncle E, in the place to be. Welcome back to Season 7, Episode 4.
Yes, sir.
Coming off of...
Returning home from Africa.
It was a return.
Yes.
That's right. Today we have a bit of a history lesson.
Yes, sir.
Turned into a future, maybe a proposition or a future case study. You'll see. And I'm excited for it. I hope you all have been well. If you don't know who we are as a podcast, what we do is we're two African millennials living in diaspora, and we're giving our perspective on the world and all things African as we edutain you on culture, food, music, anything African related.
Yep.
That is the lens we're looking from, and we're excited to just guide you through that. So without further ado, I want to get started with today's episode. And
yes.
I understand you have done some framing for us, some maybe segmenting.
Like we say, got around.
But it's exciting because today we're going to be talking about Upper Volta region, also known as Burkina Faso.
Right.
Very long structured history. And man, why don't you do the honors of introducing kind of why we're even talking about it?
No, 100%. You know, we love our African history here.
Yeah.
And our history allows us to understand the current state of events and hopefully make rectifications in the future that can benefit us as all Africans. And being especially from the region of West Africa, there's this one country which we're going to talk about, which is, if anything, is a metaphor of a lot of the geopolitical outcomes that we see in current day Africa, specifically around African countries with resources. Yes, our history, everyone knows in Africa, there was a scramble for Africa, and then the colonizers came, split their pies, chose each country based on probably resources that they had, not probably, based on resources they had.
Almost definitively.
Definitely colonized us. We decided we want our independence. They left. And prosperity was supposed to happen after we've gained our independence.
Right.
And in most African countries, specifically in the West Africa, we have not seen the prosperity that has benefited the average African. So today our subject for history lesson is going to be about no other place than a landlocked West African country that goes by Burkina Faso, previously known as Upper Volta. So Upper Volta / was changed to Burkina Faso, and Burkina Faso means the land of upright men.
Right.
So firstly, Burkina Faso was colonized by France. Do you have any guesses for why the French wanted that piece of land?
Yeah. I mean, I have also a little bit of knowledge there. So I know it was like quite literally for gold.
Yes. Yes. Gold and labor. And also from a resource standpoint, cotton for the French textile industry at the time. So access to not only the cotton, but obviously the interior of West Africa, which there's a whole episode, if you haven't seen it, where I talk about what made the Europeans want to come into the interior of Western Africa for specifically that gold, led to the European exploration into the interior of Western Africa was really in search of those gold deposits, and Burkina being also one of those geographic locations. So the French wanted gold, labor, and then for their industries, the cotton for their textile industries, right?
Yep.
We know now that was their motivating factors for colonizing Burkina.
Yep.
Burkina gains their independence. Do you think the French left or did not leave?
No, and we still see that they're still there till that.
Exactly.
Till this day. Yeah.
So begs the question, France didn't actually just leave or just take the resources. They actually left something even more debilitating towards the independence of their colonies, which is the franc, the West African currency, in which now former French colonies, their money is essentially being printed by the central bank in France.
In France, yeah.
So it's essentially a way of detouring the wealth of their colonies to Paris instead of Ouagadougou. Now, we go back to Burkina Faso. I want to talk about their longest serving president to date.
Yep.
A man known as Blaise Compaoré,
Yep.
who was president from 1987 to 2014.
Yeah.
27 years. Again, before I talk about him, what was your, at least growing up especially in Eastern Africa, what did you know about Blaise Compaoré, him as president of Uganda? Of Burkina Faso. You guys had your own, but yeah.
We knew him as the best friend that betrayed Thomas Sankara. That's how we knew him. And Burkina Faso, I think, was so poor, even to Ugandans, that we were like, he is what happens when you betray your best friend. That's how we knew of Blaise Compaoré.
So Judas.
Okay. To the max.
I see.
Yeah. Judas Max Pro.
But then here's the thing though, Anzo. For 27 years, if one person was president for 27 years, you would naturally think he was doing a lot of good to continue to be re-elected for 27 years.
Some would think, yeah.
That's what a lot of times we have leaders in Africa, right? They've been there for decades. And if you are leader of a country and for 27 years, almost 30 years, there had to be immense amount of prosperity associated with your tenure that allowed you to continue to stay in power.
Or relative prosperity.
Relative.
So at least you've brainwashed your constituents or you have just rigged every election. Yeah.
That's the case most of the time. But in Blaise Compaoré's run, like I wanted to look at from an economic standpoint, what did he really do for Burkina to, let's say, even try and give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's 27 years, we're justified. We know it's usually never justified, but what was it? So here are some key stats.
Okay.
Under Blaise, the GDP grew on paper approximately 5% annually, but it was not inclusive. Now let's look at their poverty rates. By the end of his reign in 2014, nearly 44 to 46% of the population still lived in extreme poverty.
41?
44 to 46% of Burkinabes lived in extreme poverty during his reign, by the end of his reign. Despite his decades of stability, because that's a huge part we don't miss, big part of why these leaders stay for a long term and they're accepted globally, internationally, is they're being deemed as they bring stability in the country for investment. Stability for who, really? We know who they're bringing stability for. But despite decades of that stability, Burkina Faso remained in the bottom 10 of the UN Human Development Index. But now, okay, economically, from what it sounds like, 27 years, he didn't do anything. If anything, the country was reverting back. There was no progress. What was his alliances? Because to stay in power in Africa for that long usually means you formed alliances that enabled you to stay there. So one of his major alliances, obviously, was being the golden boy of the Françafrique. He allowed French companies exclusive rights to gold mining and cotton exports. So we see this pattern everywhere, Anzo. A leader stays for 30, 40 years. The West calls it stability, but the people are still illiterate. Poverty is still high. So who is that stability actually for, if I ask you?
I don't think that. So there's so many like things to pick from the stats you've read. The one that sticks out the most is the 5% GDP growth, because if you're going 5% of $1 million every year, that's nominal. If you're going 5% of $1 trillion, that's a lot. GDP is also a bad metric for me generally, because if I sell you this cup and then you sell it right back, our GDP went up, but no real like production happened.
Right.
You know? And so for me, what sticks out is, and you asked the question like who's really benefiting. It's very, very clear who's benefiting, and it's the Burkinabe elites, right?
Yes.
Compaoré and his friends.
Yep.
And I think this goes back to the question, or kind of the proposition we made in prior episodes, where the problem with people like him is they're not leaving behind like viable institutions for success.
Nope.
He rules for 27 years. Those were probably the 27 best years of his life and his friends.
Yeah.
Where is he in exile? Like in Cote d'Ivoire right now?
Yeah.
Probably still living equally as good. But Burkina Faso is essentially left to
Building
start
from scratch.
from 27 years ago, where they were. And shout out to Traoré right now. More on him later. But it can't benefit anyone.
Isn't it a shame, though?
It's a shame.
30 years of, that's the whole generation.
Yeah. That's a lifetime for some people.
You know, if you're looking at life expectancies in Africa, so around that region,
Much less that region.
that's half your life.
Yeah.
You were under a system in which only the few top elites fatten their pockets and the rest of the country remained poor. And also the people who colonized you, these French companies, mining companies, are coming in and making millions of dollars in revenue off of your own natural resources. And imagine just sitting there and watching that happen and wishing you had a proper leader who would actually make sure that the country, the people who are native to the land from Burkina Faso are benefiting first. You would almost wish they had a leader like that.
Yeah. So is this our example of class warfare, for example?
Class warfare, the effects when capitalism arrives in the post-colonial era. Capitalism in Africa, post-colonialism, was centered around the beneficiaries being primarily the government officials and the president, the few very top, kleptocracy basically again, where the remaining mass populations remains impoverished. Little to no development, illiteracy remains high, resources, ability to generate wealth off of their natural resources such as gold, mining, are unavailable to the average African man or woman.
Yeah.
So this is always what happened. And we think of, okay, these presidents have been there for a long term. What happened? Like, how did they stay there that long? And couldn't there have been someone with the vision who would put their country first to be in place? Where are they? Why are they not there?
So now we have an example of that, who was his predecessor, right?
Yes.
So I guess a valid question is, do you think Burkina Faso, I have my own opinion, but what do you think Burkina Faso would have looked like 27 years under Sankara? Or do you think he would have even wanted to go that long? Because he was a military man. I like him, and I think a lot of Africans revere him, as do I. But I wonder, was he also subject to the same risk if he didn't leave behind viable institutions? He started to nationalize a lot of things.
For sure.
And we saw like real growth happening in Burkina Faso. But are you team Burkina Faso would have looked extremely different, or probably ran the same risk of like looking similar to what it did today if Sankara was in power?
That's a great question. I think we have to look at the facts. So for 27 years versus the small sample size of 4 years in which Thomas Sankara was president. And let me present to you some of the facts. So I'll talk about agriculture, what he did, healthcare, human rights, and environmental impact. So from an agricultural standpoint, Thomas Sankara obviously ruled from 1983 to 87. I don't want to say the ruled, but he was head of state.
Sure.
Comrade Thomas Sankara, through a coup d'etat, and loved by the people, Pan-Africanist,
All Africans.
nationalist, and was a very strong and loud advocate for basically cutting ties with the colonial powers and reclaiming our own worth, our own independence. True independence. He was one of them, cut from that cloth. So from an agricultural standpoint, it's a distributed land from feudal lords to peasants. In 3 years, wheat production rose from 1,700 kilograms per hectare to 3,800 kilograms per hectare. The country in 3 years became food sufficient, self-sufficient in 3 years. When it comes to healthcare, in that amount of time, he vaccinated 2.5 million children in just weeks. Women's rights. He outlawed FGM, forced marriages, polygamy, and he was the first African leader to appoint women in high cabinet positions. When it comes to the environment, he has actively made sure that the desertification of of Burkina was reversed. So he planted 10 million trees to stop the Sahara from spreading. Sankara's famous quote was, he who feeds you controls you.
Yeah.
He rejected foreign aid from the IMF and those Western powers that come in and try and give you aid. And knowing all that he achieved in those 4 years, rejecting foreign aid, healthcare, agriculture, women's rights, in those 4 years, what he achieved versus what we saw after 27 years with Blaise Compaoré, to answer your question, I think that sample size
self-explanatory.
shows us what trajectory Burkina was heading towards in terms of being a truly independent West African powerhouse.
Yeah. Hey, you answered the question, and I think I'm on that.
But isn't it a shame?
It's a damn shame. I think that we've seen that example play out at scale, even, meaning the Blaise Compaoré argument. We've seen that example play out at scale. And so my key kind of concern with all of the good that has been done across the continent is like, is it sticky, essentially? Like, how can we ensure that this doesn't just... Because look at what Compaoré undid for all of Sankara's hard work. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What structural integrity was there to maintain the work that was laid down? We already know. You already betrayed your best friend.
Yep.
You're not like that, right?
Yep. He's what we call a sleazebag.
A sleazebag.
Proper one.
We clearly saw that his interests aligned with the West.
The West.
Which we should also throw in here that the West was very involved in his...
Of course.
In overthrowing him.
Yep.
As well as Patrice Lumumba, as well as a number of other African leaders.
Yep. You can go on.
The list goes on. Gaddafi, for example, did a lot of good things for Libyans for a long time, but didn't leave behind structural integrity within institutions to maintain what was happening. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's one thing that worries me. And I'll always revere the leaders that we've had, the good ones, I should say, the ones that made something of their time in office. But ultimately, can it stick? That's my key concern.
I mean, obviously we're not just romanticizing Sankara and the Lumumbas and the Gaddafis, and that's the whole point. Is what you're saying is, right now we can look back and say these people cared about their people, and look at what they did in 4 years to show they cared about. Or Gaddafi for how many years? Lumumba barely 6 months before he was assassinated, but we were confident that had they stayed in power longer, the country would have benefited far more than what the foreign powers did.
100%.
And now, the heroes that we romanticize on them as a beacon of what Africa should be from a values and principles standpoint. But to what you're noting, though, no matter how long they became heads of state, and basically, again, it's back to they were the system. The moment you remove the Pan-Africanists from the position of power and you now insert the puppet, basically there's no resistance.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, let's take, for example, in the United States, the civil rights movements, right? Or voting rights acts or anything of that nature. The point we're trying to drive home here is that those stuck.
Yeah.
Because it literally was upended into the Constitution. And from the Constitution, the structural integrity of the Constitution remains in the U.S.
Exactly.
So whether you like me or not, you can't come and tell me that as an American citizen, I don't have the right to vote as long as I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Exactly.
Right? You can't discriminate against me based on my race, gender, sex, age, whatever the case may
Exactly.
be. You can't not... All of these protections are there that allow for... the civil rights benefit started with Black Americans, exploded into everybody else. Think of everybody that benefited from that movement. Right?
I mean, we're sitting right here, a direct
Because of
benefactors of the Civil Rights Act.
And so that's my kind of key.
That's a great
concern.
comparison because Martin Luther King was assassinated.
But he still lives on.
He still lives
His
on.
work still lives on.
So, when we talk about Sankara and these leaders, it was like us saying we were so close, MLK got assassinated, and now we look back, no civil rights for Black people in America. There's still segregation. We've reverted back. And we're like, man, if MLK didn't get assassinated, we would have been able to have that.
That's the point we're trying to make here, yeah. And it's important because we have too many Thomas Sankaras.
Yeah.
Right? We have Steve Biko. We have Patrice Lumumba.
Yep.
We have Marcus Garvey is
Yep.
the father of all this.
Yep.
And so it's too many what could have beens for me. And that's what turns my gears is how do we make it stick? Che Guevara went to Congo in the 60s. And one thing that he said in his memoirs was, the people are not ready for a revolution. I don't know how much of that is not true today.
We're not willing to die for it.
And I think you have to be.
You 100% have to.
The issue is too many of us live in comfort.
We're willing to die for it, Anso? Is that what you're saying?
I think not many of us.
Of course we were. They were not willing to die for it. That's why we have so many dictators. And, sometimes they say in Africa being authoritarian is what allows you to control the people. Yeah. I just think...
Big man syndrome.
Big man syndrome. I just don't think, and I'm not trying to say it's a hot take or so, but we saw the Arab Spring, for example. And to be honest, in Burkina, how Compaoré went was the people got up, revolted, burnt down the state house and kicked him out. They were fed up. We've had it in Senegal. So the youth Kenya, uprising does happen.
Yeah.
But we're talking about in the critical periods of post-colonialism when we had these Pan-African leaders that were simply assassinated or removed by the Western powers.
Yep.
Revolution did not happen.
It didn't happen. It happened, but it didn't stick.
It didn't stick.
It didn't stick.
It didn't stick.
And then we also went through periods of civil wars. You see it all over the continent.
Coup d'etat, civil wars.
Nigeria, Uganda, it was everywhere. And Mozambique, Frelimo fighters, all those guys. But I think that's my key distinction is shout out to, bro, part of the reason we even started this whole podcast was because of our love for some of those Pan-African
exactly
leaders. But how we frame our thinking now around what sticks for me is critical because without that, we're just continuing the same model or the same cycle of shout out. I'm not saying I don't want to be another Sankara, but I don't want to be another Sankara where my life's work went to waste.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
I know what you mean.
I want it to be worthwhile where it's you know what? Because I laid this track down, it doesn't have to be a solid like house foundation.
Yeah.
But I laid like a small piece of the railroad down, and now you guys can travel that. That is good enough, and that's what I'm concerned with. And now we see modern day Burkina, right? Traoré, who we all love and revere.
Yes.
And has had too many assassination
They're
attempts
trying
on
to
his
take
life.
him out
They're trying
every
to take
time.
him out. We see it's very clear. That's one thing that concerns me today, because if you are pro-African, if you're Pan-African, and you care about Africans' success, and you see a man like that stepping up to try and mobilize his country propel them into like prosperity.
Yep.
You can't help but cheer for him, much like we do. But I just hope that in his circles and in around him, there's models that will stick, because institutions last. We know that.
Yep.
People come and go. Whether Ronaldo came and went, Real Madrid is still standing.
Facts.
Messi came and
there,
went,
Barcelona
is still standing. Institutions last. They might not last a million years or whatever, but for our modern times, we've seen the efficiency of what they can do, especially if the founding of it all is based on like maybe unalienable rights, things that are structured to help a nation really prosper. And I think the U.S., in its age of maturity and like overconsumption, whatever you want to call it, I don't think those guys planned for this to happen. Somewhere along the way, they started to get a little bit too greedy.
Yeah.
But I think that's anything like with an institution, call it Saudi Arabia, right? Saudi Arabia has a model that works. It's a monarchy, but the institution still lasts the test of time. So I don't think there's one right model of governance. I do think Africans need some, like, especially like, I only listen to people who were upright men. You didn't come to me with a suggestion and say, I think this will work, but it's your choice. It was like, no. My dad, my uncles, my older brothers, my cousins, they came to me and told me things the way they were. So I listened to upright men. So I think that's what a lot of us need. I hope that these upright men, or us upright men, can leave legacies of just institutions that make sense and are sticky.
Yeah. I can't add any more summary for that. And I think that's a fundamental issue, or what we can see for change to really happen. It cannot be dependent on the one man, whether no matter how visionary they are, being the institution. Because what as history has shown us is, if you remove him via assassination or exile, the institution falls, and you can now implant your puppet and set the people back. Essentially, you're exposing yourself to the outside. Yeah. And the outside has none of your best interests at heart. Any foreign aid that comes in, it's disguised. It is. We know this. So that's my key kind of. Well, I hope, Burkina now under a new leadership with Ibrahim Traoré, and although Sankara, was cut short and betrayed, his ideas lived on. But all of us are rallying for this young Pan-African leader, but we need to look at what systems is he building in Burkina that is not dependent on him being in power. Just in case, I don't wish it, I hope it never happens, but you need to know, has he built an institution or a system that is not reliant on him being head of state? Then we would say Burkina can be resilient from what we know is trying to go on with the exploitation and the neocolonialism. Exactly. Essentially, he would be on his way to. Yes. You know what I'm saying? We're going to have statues of him everywhere. Exactly. Exactly. So, that's a great topic, bro. This is a copy and paste across just so many other African countries and how their fate has been. So, obviously, today, Thomas Sankara will always be a hero that we can look up to. Yeah. And hopefully it also is a reminder.
We do need to learn from it. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
We do need to learn from it. And Blaise Compaoré, if we see you, it's on. But yeah, great topic today.
Yep.
I like that Upper Volta region discussion because it just makes it's typical case studies.
Yep.
And we look at case studies to learn from them.
For sure.
Important history lessons for those who didn't know it.
Yep.
And looking forward to the next discussion we have on this. Hopefully, in years to come, we only have good things to say about this.
I hope so. And you talked about him. This is just reminding me of Sir Alex Ferguson and Manchester United again. So hopefully, United on the Carrick. Sir Alex went, and what happened? We're still waiting for the Barclays. So
we're still waiting.
It just shows us in life.
It does.
We had great men. Great men. Sometimes these are the cons.
These are the cons. Yeah. Well, that's been episode 4. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, please don't forget to engage with us on Substack. That's where we're going to be answering all of your questions or concerns, anything you want to shoot at us. Just Substack. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Follow all our pages. We're on TikTok, Instagram.
All platforms.
All platforms. And yeah, this has been the history lesson on Upper Volta region. Signing out until next time. Peace.